Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Eric Strait. I am a certified sommelier through the Court of Master Sommeliers, as well as holding the WSET diploma. And I am coming to you again on behalf of Saratoga Eagle Sales and Service to discuss another one of the delicious wines in their ever-expanding portfolio and to do a virtual tasting note for you. So the wine that we're going to be discussing today is from the producer Jasci Marchesani. This is their Montepulciano di Abruzzo. The vintage is 2017. So a couple quick notes. Jasci Marchesani refers to the two names of the families that now oversee and run this label. It is all family owned from start to finish, except for the sourcing of the fruit, which I'll get to in a second. The label was established about 50 years ago, around 1970, and they have been farming organically since 1978. So when you do a little bit of digging and research on Jasci Marchesani, you'll see that they often refer to themselves as a wine firm with branded wines. So yes, they are family owned and everything that they do is very hands-on. But the source of the fruit most likely does not come from their own vineyards. However, because they are so adamant about organic practices, they have a lot of say as far as what goes on in the vineyards, as far as how the grapes are grown, how they're harvested, etc. Right now, I believe all of the winemaking is done by Ludovico Jasci, while much of the vineyard practices, as far as organic practices go, are overseen by Jasci Marchesani, as well as Sebastiano Jasci. So Montepulciano di Abruzzo, right? We're in Italy, but where in Italy are we? So if you look at this map right here, you will see that Abruzzo is more kind of like central Italy, located more along like the eastern coast. Your two big geographical features that are going to influence climate are going to be the Adriatic Sea over here to the east, as well as the Apennine Mountains over here on the west. So climate, I would say you're dealing with more of like a Mediterranean climate, right? So you're going to have warm, dry summers, more cool, not cold, but mild winters. The one thing about Abruzzo is that it has this reputation for contributing a vast majority of the wine that it produces to much of Italy's like generic wine lake, if you will. So mass production of not high quality. However, there's always exceptions to the rule, and I will point out one producer that actually produces within this appellation itself, and that's Emilio Pepe. And if you've ever had a chance to taste those wines, they're absolutely delicious. They're completely age-worthy, and they are almost of cult status. So, you know, don't rule Abruzzo out as far as not being able to make amazing wine, because they do in the right hands. And I think when we get to the tasting note on this towards the end of the video, you'll see that there's a lot going on in this bottle that I think you should consider. So as far as Montepulciano itself as a grape, what should you expect? So it is a high yielding grape, and it does ripen fairly late. So even though it is, you know, produced in more prominent and more northerly regions like Tuscany, right here, it likes more warmth. So it does tend to show better the more south you go. Hence why you see a lot of examples coming out of Abruzzo. As far as structure goes, it is a fairly structured grape. So, you know, I would expect things like medium plus the high acid, medium plus the high tannins. The wines also tend to be very deeply colored. So you know, while most people write off this appellation as just being, you know, frou-frou or whatever, it can produce serious examples. Like I said, Emilio Pepe's examples, which are completely age-worthy, is probably the first producer that comes to mind. But if you do have a chance to get a hold of one of these bottles yourselves, you know, it would be great to hear your thoughts on the age-worthiness of these wines. All right, so for the cuvee itself on the 2017 vintage, we've already mentioned that it is 100% organically farmed. This is also 100% Montepulciano. So within Italian wine law, the Montepulciano di Abruzzo appellation states that in order for you to call this wine Montepulciano di Abruzzo, you only need to have 85% Montepulciano grapes in the cuvee. The other 15% can come from grapes, quote unquote, that are suitable for being grown in the Abruzzo. And this can be anything from Cabernet Sauvignon to Merlot to Syrah to any other of the maybe 3,000 other indigenous varietals that are grown in Italy. All the grapes are hand harvested, so no machines used in the vineyard. 15 days of skin contact or maceration before fermentation. And then it is aged for 6 months and they say oak barrels. They don't give any indication of if it's new or used, large or small. We'll get to those like kind of nitty-gritty details in the tasting notes. Alcohol on this is 13.5%. So let's get into the wine itself. So we're gonna look at the color first. So again, 2017 vintage. You know, as you can see, obviously red wine. There's no indication of gas in here. However, the rim, when I am looking at it, looks fairly hazy. So I'm kind of questioning if there's maybe a little bit of sediment in here or if they chose to bypass the filtering process or the fining process, which is usually a good indication of quality, of a quality conscious producer. I would say color is more of a purple core, kind of fading to a very thin purple or ruby rim. And again, a little bit of haziness on, I notice it more on the rim than I do in the core, which kind of makes me question if they chose to not filter this wine. So on the nose, I'd say this is of more medium to verging on medium plus intensity, right? So the first things that come to mind to me are going to be black cherries, like fresh violets. I also get a little bit of like dried cranberries. There's this freshly tilled like potting soil component to the wine as well. Blueberry skin. I get some prunes. And some more like savory characteristics like black licorice spice almost. There's almost like this like really fresh like black olive tapenade note to it. You know, the fruit almost comes across as kind of stewed, but yet it's bright. I don't know if that makes sense. So I really don't get any indications of new oak on this. So if I'm looking for new oak, I would be looking for things like sweet baking spices, vanilla, um, like a heavy toasted note maybe. But I don't really get any of that on this. I really thought I was getting traces of vanilla uh, in the beginning, but going back to this, I don't get any vanilla at all. So I'm gonna say like the oak that they were using was most likely neutral barrels or of larger size. And when we discuss the price at the end, that kind of makes sense. There's also a faint underlying note of like cocoa powder on this. So let's put it on the palate. So wine is dry. Acid, I'm going to say, is medium plus. It is verging on high. I'm a little bit hesitant on calling it high because when I compare it to things like Nebbiolo, it is slightly less, but it is verging like towards that spectrum of like higher acidity. But for all sakes and purposes, we could say like medium plus verging on high. I would call the tannins on this medium plus as well as far as quantity goes. They kind of have like a fine-grained, chalky texture to them. But what I am looking for on this are oak tannins. So instead of usually the tannins that you get from fruit are felt around the gums and the sides of the cheeks, oak tannins you usually feel towards the middle and back of the tongue. And I really don't get much oak tannin on this. So as far as trying to confirm if there's any new oak on this wine, I'm going to say no. But again, so all those flavor profiles or all those aromatics that I had on the nose, I'm definitely going to confirm on the palate. I think what comes through more on the palate here is more of like this purple floral component. So I think the floral aspect of this wine is more accentuated on the palate than it was on the nose. I also think that the red fruit component kind of comes through a little bit more on the palate as well. And it's super bright. And I don't know if that's because of the acidity on this wine that's kind of giving it a little bit of lift, but it's absolutely delicious and has awesome length to it. Alcohol at 13.5, I would say is probably a good call. Looking at viscosity on this, legs are they're not thick at all. They're by no means thin. I wouldn't say they're fast or slow to run. So, that alcohol call, 13.5% seems right. It doesn't feel warm at all on the palate. I think this is super balanced. And this, granted, again, I should be tasting this slightly cooler, but if this had a little bit of a chill on it, I think this would seem even more in balance. So, food. I mean, what would you do with this? So, I'm looking at acid right now. I'm looking at tannins, and I'm looking for some sort of like maybe braised fatty meat because this has the tannin and acid structure to be able to get through that. So possibly like short ribs in a red wine based or tomato based sauce. I think you could even do something amazing like a bolognese from veal, pork, beef. Again, red wine based or tomato sauce based, just with a little bit of fat on it to kind of like give a little bit of credit to the acids and tannin in this wine. Pricing. So this is going to be wholesale pricing again. So this is price to retailer. This is not the price that you're going to see it on the shelf. But for buyers out there at either restaurants or retail stores, this is what it would be offered to you. On one case, and these are 12-pack cases, the cost is $8.66 per bottle. On two cases, it gets down to $7.99 per bottle, and these are 750 milliliter bottles. No deeper discounts on that right now that are published. As far as point scores go, the only one that's gotten some recognition on this, because this is not a widely distributed wine in the United States right now, is from Luca Moroni, who gave it 91 points. He's a big Italian wine critic. He usually comes out with a huge book every year on like every single Italian wine he's tasted. So in the world of Italian wine, he's fairly significant. But again, like points really should not matter about this. It should just be about you enjoying what's in your glass. So if this wine seems like it's something that may appeal to you, I encourage you to seek out your nearest retailer or ask for it when you go out to your restaurant when they decide to reopen, and let us know what you think. Enjoy.